And if you remember back a few years ago when we were in the Cairo Museum, it feels like a long time ago, there were little statuettes on the sides of the wall all around. And I said, remember these because we'll talk about them again later. That's when they come in. They represent the days of the year and the organs of the body. 365 to represent the days of the year, plus 26 representing organs of the body. Okay, certain organs of the body. These ones come in turn, one after the other, in place of the king, to do the confession in front of the goddess Ma'at. They deny that he's done anything bad on the first day of the year, on the second day of the year, on the third day of the year, using his right arm, using his left arm, and so on. When this confession is completed, you step into the next hall, which is the hall of judgment. In the hall of judgment, we have the god Osiris, the judge of the underworld, sitting on one side. And then we have 13 jury, also in the hall of judgment. And he woke up, the person would be led by Anubis, the jackal god, to a balance, or a scale, where on one side they place the heart of the deceased, and on the other side they place the feather of Ma'at. And they weigh the heart against the feather. If your heart is lighter than the feather, you're a light-hearted person, you're a kind person, it's restored back in your body and you continue the journey. If your heart is heavier than the feather, it drops down the other side of the scale. There is an animal waiting on the side, which is a mixture of a pig, a crocodile, and a hippo. Okay? All three of which are symbols of the god Set, the god of evil. Okay? And he would eat your heart. Was your heart eaten, the most vital part of your body is missing, you cannot be resurrected, you're just stranded into eternity. You don't get anywhere. If you were a good person, the heart is then restored back in the body, okay? And you're led by Anubis to enter into the fields of Ayaro, paradise to the Egyptians. It's a land where there are trees and fruits all year round, there is no floods, there is no droughts, they don't have to work hard for anything, everything is done for them, everything is simple. Rivers of milk and honey, basically. Right? But the fields of Ayaro have 16 gates. Okay.
Not so fast.
Right? It's not that easy. You can see it at the distance there, but you still have to get there. And it's not a matter of choice. You choose one or the other of the gates. You have to go through all 16 gates to enter into the fields of Ayar. And each gate has its own guardian and has its own magical spell. So you have to say these magical spells at the gates, one after the other, as you pass into the fields of Ayar. Right? For a commoner, that's as far as you would go. But if you were a king, you had to go a step further. In the center of the fields of Ayaro, there is the palace of Osiris. So you want to become Osiris, so you have to enter inside the palace of Osiris. And the palace of Osiris has 21 gates with 21 guardians. And again, you have to pass through each one of these gates, saying the appropriate spell every time for all 21 gates to enter inside the palace of Osiris. If you make it successfully, then you become Osiris.
I now know why the temples are so big. It took
Now you know why the temples are so
took
big.
that long to record all this.
This is not on the temples. This is only in the tombs. This was originally written in the very early period. It was just written on rolls of papyri and placed inside the coffins. And at that stage it was called the coffin text. Then it was written on the walls of some of the pyramids. Okay, there's only about 4 or 5 pyramids, 5 pyramids that actually have any writing on the inside. And then it was called the pyramid text. Then later it was written on the walls of the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, and there we call it the Book of the Dead. Okay? But it's all the same literature, basically. It's talking about the same thing. Okay, this journey to it. The question is, what's the sense behind all this? What's the reason? What's the meaning behind all this? Why do they have to go through all of this journey? Basically, the person, the king in particular, is trying to change from a human to a god. You want to be promoted. If you work in an office or you work in a company and you want a raise or you want a promotion, you have to show that you deserve it. You have to work for it. So it's the same thing here. He wants to be promoted from a human to a god. To do this, he has to prove that he's worth the promotion. What are the basic major differences between man and God? Gods are eternal. There is no limits to where the gods can be. God is all over the place, everywhere. Gods are almighty, but also gods are merciful. if you look at this journey that the person just did, by traveling through the hours of day and night, you overcome time, eternity. By traveling through the layers of heaven, you're breaking the boundaries. There's no limits to where you can be. By overcoming all the enemies and obstacles that you meet on your way, you're almighty. And then with that confession and the weighing of the heart, you also prove that you're a kind person. You're merciful. So when you pass the test, these things, you're allowed to enter into eternity. You're allowed to become a God in the after. Make sense? A little bit?
Okay, but one of the pharaohs represented on the tombs that he could talk to the gods, but he didn't represent that he had become a god on earth.
Some of them did. Ramses II was a god on earth.
A god on earth. So
In
so
fact,
he represented that he'd already passed all those stages and he'd come back as a god.
A lot
on
of the earlier gods, the pyramid building period, for example, all of the gods who built pyramids were gods on earth. They were actually, but they were Horus. He has to go through this process to become Osiris.
Oh, okay. So
He has
if
to
he was
go-
already a god on earth,
He's a
didn't need
god on
pyramid.
earth, but it doesn't mean. But he wants to become Osiris, not just any god. He wants to become Osiris in the afterworld, an eternal god in the afterworld. Ramses
A god,
II.
but not. Okay, so as a god on earth, he was a god, but not an eternal god.
He was a god, but not an eternal god because he dies.
Ah, okay. He still has the weakness in the flesh.
He still has the weakness.